It is time. It's time to stop hiding. It's time to stand up. It's time for Christians to come together, to share their testimony, to inspire hope, and to join their brothers and sisters as we answer the call. It is time to wake up the lions. And I have an absolute lion with me today, folks. I have the incredible blessing of having had this gentleman on two of my other podcasts. He is amazing. He's got a great story, perfect for this show. Very much looking forward to having him on and being able to talk about these topics on this show today. So please welcome to our show. He is a Catholic life coach for men, and he is the host of the podcast Catholic Life Coach for Men. Please welcome Michael Jaquith. How you doing, sir?
Rory, I'm amazing. It's a delight, a privilege, and an honor to be here with you again.
Thank you so much. You are definitely one of my favorite guests, and thank you for being here on this podcast so we can talk about these issues. Brother, this is Wake Up the Lions, and you are absolutely a lion, in my opinion, and I cannot wait for everybody to hear your story. So why don't you give everybody an idea? Who is Dr. Michael Jaquith? What are you about? How has God influenced your life?
I think what I'd like to do with your permission is just dive right on back to the beginning. And I think I'm going to mention a couple of the dark starting points of my story because I think they really set the stage for some of the struggles that came later on. And so just to maybe start here, when I was conceived, it was out of wedlock and it was in a situation that was unplanned. And my father pressured my mother to abort me. And that really kind of sets the stage for what happens. And so my dad wasn't ready to be a father. And to be honest, wasn't a good one. As we went into childhood, there were broken bones, there were bruises, multiple physical things happened. And that was largely swept under the rug until when I was in sixth grade, it was discovered that what he had been doing to my younger sister and when sent him to jail for 10 years. And I don't want to go too
Mm,
much into the details there, but sufficient to say that was a very dark place for the family.
yeah.
One of the side effects of this is that there's a tremendous amount of social shame that happens in a small community to the rest of the family after an event like this is announced. And we were nominally Christian, maybe like my mom and dad are Christian, but my image of the father was based off my biological father. And honestly, he was a jerk face. Beatings occurred. Like we're not talking spankings here. We're talking beatings. Like we're talking like stuff on other parts of the body than the buttocks that were pretty severe. And it's safe to say that when my dad left, I wanted nothing to do with the faith. That was my perception of it. That was my view of this. And I was like, nope, all that is just utter garbage because my experience with those who advocated Christianity was this. And what's worse, after my dad went to jail, there were a few individuals in the church that kind of helped my mom out some, but that social shame stigma was just such a powerful part of it.
Wow.
So here I am. I'm going to fast forward a little bit to high school. I'm mad. I'm angry. I'm hurt. I'm bitter. I'm also very smart. And so, these other folks at the school, they'd say something mean. Well, I'd cut them back verbally. Well, I was quicker than them. So their response then was to say, well, yeah, you're just the son of a such and such and such. That means you're a such and such too.
Mm,
And so one of the things you see even the beginning of the story is my story has a lot of generational sin in it. And kind of the three big generational sins you see tracking through this story are anger, alcohol, and sexuality. And there's sins associated with all three of those that play a role as my story evolves. So I leave high school. I should note that I met one guy, the one beacon of light. Really, I have two friends that I remember from my high school days. One of which, though, he was a young Catholic man, and I went over to his house regularly. And it was the only house I'd ever been in where the parents were still together and there was peace in the household. And that made an impression on me. I mean, nowhere near enough an impression to overcome the trauma and start point there, but that was lodged in the back of my brain. And I went off to college and I chased what I called the Church of Hedonism. I drank like a fish. I could have drank you under the table, almost guaranteed. I chased ladies very badly, which I now attribute as the grace of God. I didn't know at the time, but I chased them. And I also did really well in college. Like that was, I had this gift, this blessing that I was very good at school. And when I left, the greatest words my mother gave me, her parting wisdom was get a degree that will let you make a lot of money so you don't have to repeat your childhood. And two, I'll buy you all the contraceptives you need just to make sure you don't get a pregnancy before you're ready. That was her total story. She sent me out the door, more or
wow.
less.
Wow.
And so you kind of see here the setup for this story going into college, not knowing what's what, not having good grounding, really hurting, not even wanting to acknowledge the hurts there. Like, I don't think I knew at the time anything at all about a father wound or what that even looked like. There was no conscious recognition of that need as much as just I was just angry. So I go through and feel free to dive in at any point here, of course, if you want to poke and prod. And I go through and things get interesting probably about 8 years later. And I go to college, I go to graduate school, I go to Cornell, I'm working my way through this PhD. I'm nearing the end of my PhD. And the hound of heaven finally reached me a little bit, just a little bit. I'm very stubborn. I'm very stubborn. God's typical communication style to me is a 2x4 to the head, delivered at high speed repeatedly. That's about what it takes to penetrate through my thick noggin.
I'm with you.
So, so I'm feeling this lack. I connected with a few ladies, didn't work out. I was chasing for the wrong thing. I mean, let's just be honest here. Like, I was not pursuing a lady for honor and dignity. I was pursuing it just as, in the way that an angry, hurt young man does. And it wasn't working for me. And I kept felt more and more empty. I remember just like going home and be like, that wasn't it. And so I remember my buddy Paul, his name was Paul, back from, high school there. And he and I connected and had most kind of somewhat dating connection, but increased it and started talking a lot more. And he said, Michael, would you ever consider joining the faith? And I was like, no way, Paul, I'm not doing that. That's ridiculous. I know what happens there. That's no chance of that. And Paul, to his credit, took that. And I was probably snarkier than what I just did. But Paul took it very well, stayed calm, and said, okay, and just waited and was patient. I think he was a smart guy at that time. And maybe about 6 months later on, I don't know what hit me, but I just was so desperate to find something that mattered, something of meaning, something of purpose. Bishop Robert Barron's one of my favorite. I love listening to him. And he talks about how this idea that the three ways God reaches our heart are the good, the true, and the beautiful. And those three things, when we really encounter them, are undeniable. Like, no intellectual construction I can build argues against the good, the true, and the beautiful. Not in the middle of the night when you're awake there laying in bed, unable to find your purpose, and you recollect back to something that was said to you that hit one of those three categories, it's powerful. And so about this time, without telling Paul, because let's be, keep the priorities straight here, I started attending church. And
Gotcha.
I did a lot of soul searching, a lot of digging, and ultimately I discerned that the call for me was to pursue the Catholic faith. So I started attending Mass, and I still didn't tell Paul. I was in Mass for months, and I still didn't tell Paul. I didn't tell really anyone, didn't tell my mom. Nobody in my family was Catholic. Nobody was really even Christian. My grandparents were probably the closest thing we had to real Christians. Everyone else was like maybe Christian in name only, kind of maybe, but not really. Like, I'll go to Sunday, Christmas, Easter, if I'm not busy, kind of level. And I remember this one particular day. It was an Ash Wednesday. And so I'm walking into this church. All right, I mentioned the 2x4 to the head. And I park, right? So I park my car and I said a prayer, Lord, if this is real, if this is what you really want me to do, I can't imagine it is, but if it is, would you make it obvious to me? Okay. Now imagine this structure. It's a pretty big building. It's pretty wide, at least 100 foot wide inside. And as I walk in the front door, there's this banner, maybe 8 feet tall, spreading the bulk of the width of the church that says, Repent today, do it now. I was like, fine, fine, fine. I get it. I get it. Message received. Like, it was huge.
Wow.
And that was sort of, let's say, the first time that I really, really opened myself. I wasn't ready to join yet. Like, let's not jump ahead of ourselves here. I mentioned the stubbornness,
Right.
but I really opened up. And I think for me, one of the biggest pulls was that quest for meaning, something bigger. Like, I just wasn't finding it. Like, Rory, I had all the world said I should have. I had a degree, I had education, I had lined up money. I was starting to get girls. It's a funny thing when you start getting more money, you'd get a little more successful with the ladies. There's a correlation there. Um, but I wasn't happy. Like,
Yeah.
I really wasn't. And I couldn't argue with that. All of the arguments the devil kept laying in my head just were still nothing compared to I wasn't happy. And so I joined, I decided, all right, fine. For those who understand how you join the Catholic Church, you have to join this thing called RCIA to discern. I went up to the priest and I said, okay, I'm ready. I'll join RCIA. He said, nope, we're full. I was like, wait, what? Hold on here. Hold on. You don't understand what's taking me to this point. You can't be full. God himself hit me over there with 2x4 telling me to join, and you're saying you're full. He's like, yep, sorry, join next year. I hate being told no.
I've never even heard that before.
I totally agree. I honestly think that this was God having a different plan for me.
Okay. Because I've
Like
never heard a priest, pastor, anybody say, we're full. You can't come here for spiritual guidance. Oh, my word.
the the word that the analogy that Paul used was as if the prodigal son came home to find all the doors locked and barred. He's banging on the door, and the father's like, "No, we're closed. Go away."
I finally decide this is right for me, and now you're telling me, sorry, too late. Come back next year. I've never even heard that, brother.
It's part of the story though.
Yeah.
So I honestly think that I would not have done well in RCIA. I'm very smart. I'm very snarky at this time. I'm still very hurt and angry. Like I've dealt with none of that trauma from childhood at this point in my story. I've just buried it as deep as I could, push that trash compactor button down, and have the oozy, gooey goodness that comes out of the broken bottom of that trash can gooing all over under my counters in my whole kitchen at this point.
Love the
The smell is
visuals. All
delightful.
right. Okay.
So I do some research. I asked a buddy of mine, and we found this old Irish priest about an hour away who was willing to do something called private instruction. And this is something that a lot of Catholics have never heard of before, but you don't have to join the church through RCA. And this priest was the perfect man for me. He was a type A, like I'm type A. He was very, very competent, very smart guy, but he was filled with the grace of the Lord on a level I've not seen. He's older. He was probably in his 70s, and he was handicapped. And so I remember one particular time. His thing is he had money. He had a good life, and so he would just take me and my buddy out to lunch, and we'd have our instruction at lunch. And this one particular day, we're pulling in, and he really struggled to walk. He was quite handicapped, and a car pulls out of the handicapped parking spot right in front of the door of the restaurant. And he says, "Oh, thank you, Lord. What a gift. That's exactly the spot I could have asked for." And at that moment, another car turns closer than us and starts heading towards that spot. And the priest looks at this other car and says, "Oh, sir, bless you if you do not take that spot, and bless you twice if you do." And he took the spot. We had to park a long ways out, and the priest walked slowly and painfully all the way in and never said a negative thing about it once. And that struck me. I was a complainer. I was negative. I was bitter. And I was like, how in the world can you follow a God that doesn't give you the lowest hanging thing, like just a parking spot so you don't have to walk your painful self all the way, and you still bless him? Like it sounds silly almost as I say it now, but that struck me. Like
Yeah.
that didn't exist in my world.
I I mean, it's an event like that that usually gets someone to kind of wake up and
Yeah,
see that sort of thing.
absolutely. So we go through this in private instruction, and he pretty quickly figured out I was a smart guy too. And so he's like, here's a bunch of books. Read these and ask me questions you have. And I come back and ask questions. He's like, they were good questions. He's like, cool, now read this pile of books. He comes back and says, you know what? You already know more than anyone coming out of RCA. Do you want to join the church? I said, yeah, I do. And he said, okay, let's do it this Saturday. I'm like, all right, this Saturday works. And so it was just totally casual like that. I joined the church. And I said to myself, all right, my problems are solved. I've joined the faith. I'm a Christian now. All my stuff's behind me. Well, I had not dealt with any of the hurt trauma, as I mentioned. I also had not dealt with any generational sins. Those three categories I mentioned are about to come flaring up real hard.
Yeah.
I'd kind of been hiding from the sexuality one by chasing the ladies and drinking like a fish. I'm like, cool, I'll just stop drinking entirely. That'll work. And the anger, what do I have to be angry about? I'm Christian now. So I move. I meet this lovely young lady. We get married. And at first, things are fine. But she and I decide we're not going to have a baby right away. We both need time to get our careers going. So what happens? We get pregnant on our honeymoon. We actually abstained the first 3 nights of our honeymoon in order to make sure we wouldn't get pregnant, and then got pregnant. Um, that was the first challenge. But then we have this beautiful little girl, and she's a wonderful baby. And she does what all little babies do, it cries and annoying. And I remember the day that I was in church, and this kiddo was just screaming. And I take her back to the cry room, and she just screams, get more and more angry. And I found myself just so angry. I'm like, where is this anger coming from? Like, I mean, I was livid. Like, I wasn't hurting her, but I could tell, like, I was almost shaking. I just had so much anger in my body. And I was like, what is the deal with this? And I didn't know it. but another gentleman who's a bit older was watching me from the sidelines. And his wife knew my wife, and they staged this without me knowing what the next part of the story. And so the next Sunday, I'm there, right? And I'm walking out of church after Mass, and he walks up to me and he says, "Hi, my name is Ben." I'm like, "Hi, Ben, my name is Michael." And he reaches out, he says, "You can throw this in the trash if you want, but I've got a little flash drive here for you. It's a gift. Someone did this for me once many years ago. Now I'd like to return the favor and pay it forward." On this flash drive is a whole bunch of talks, audiobooks, talks. He probably broke copyright. Don't tell the, whatever governing bodies of copyright agency. I'm sure the flash drive's long destroyed anyways. If this would help you, I'm just going to give this to you. I remember when I was younger, I didn't have a lot of mentors, didn't have a lot of guys help me. And then he hands me a business card and he says, "If you ever want to talk, lunch is on me." I just was like blindsided by this. And so I'm like, gee, thanks, man. That's great. Shove it in my pocket. Okay, honey, we got to go. We're late for lunch, right? And so we're in the car on the way home. My wife says, "What happened there?" She knows the full story, but she plays it cool. And I'm like, "Oh, well, this Ben gave me this thing." She's like, "I'm not going to do anything with it though." She's like, "Well, why don't you just check it out?" Like, fine, fine. Again, that stubbornness streak is strong. When I get home, I'm going to give you a guess what the very first talk in the first folder was. Talk on anger, of course. Deacon Bob McDonald, I still remember today, overcoming anger. And there's a lot of great material there. But that really, I'll say, started me into this view that for the first time in my life, you could become Christian, be forgiven of all your past sins, and still have a heap of troubles and a heap of problems you've got to work through.
I think people find Christianity, they join it in some way, and they think that, okay, now where's my easy button?
Right. Yeah, I
Jesus is
wanted an
supposed
easy
to give
button.
me an easy button, right? So,
Well, I think too, one of the things that happens, you see this a lot. You join the faith, and maybe you get a little bit of initial bubbly goodness, but then pretty quickly, it almost seems like things get worse. And
mhm.
you're like, what gives? Like, I joined this because I wanted things to be better. And now I'm more angry at my wife, at my child. I'm now struggling with lustful thoughts, and alcohol's still a factor in my life. And it seems like it's all gotten worse. And what we don't realize is that as we reject the devil, the devil makes this deal with all of us. Worship me, and I'll give you the world. Now, what I was a lousy bum, and I didn't ask for the world. For me, a couple drinks and a little bit of female attention was all I asked for. And the devil's like, "Cool, if you worship me for that, I'll give you that."
Right.
There's this scene in one of my favorite movies. It's A Man for All Seasons. At the very end of the movie, St. Thomas More is talking to Richard Rich, and Richard Rich has just perjured himself to betray Thomas More under oath. And as he walks by, he looks and says, "Can I see that chain of office?" And he's become the leader of Wales, whatever, viceroy, whatever the term is. And he looks at me and says, "Why, Richard, it profits a man nothing to give his soul for the whole world. But for Wales, Richard, for Wales." And I feel like that was one of the realizations I'm coming to is that I had given so much for just something so paltry. And as that little bit of comfort was stripped away, because the devil's like, "You're not worshiping me anymore. You don't get that anymore."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "God, you're supposed to be coming in here. You're supposed to be solving this." And God's answer was, "Dude, you got a lot deeper to go before it gets better."
Wow. Yeah. I mean, so many of us make that bargain that way. And
Hmm.
it's just a minute pleasure. It's, chasing the church of hedonism, right? And we say, all right, it's not worth it. It's easier to do it this way. And I think that's something that I've heard that story, that part of that story, from so many people where I get involved in the faith. I start to try and make myself a better man, especially, right? And then everything gets harder and everything's in my way. And now I'm getting punched in the face. What's going on? And they don't really understand the spiritual warfare that comes along with that, because when you join the faith, you just got on the devil's radar as someone who's now dangerous.
Yes. Yes. I think we humans like to think a lot in Booleans. We like to think of it's either A or B, and we don't like to think about the messy middle.
Hmm.
And most of life lives in the messy middle. So I'm a father of six kids. I've now taken six children successfully through diapers. There's a lot of messy middle in life. And we don't like that. Like that doesn't align with our sense of how the world ought to be, perhaps. And one of the funny things about humans is we don't live in a world of facts. We live in a story of narratives. We live in a world of story. And this story is far more powerful in terms of how it causes us to act than what the facts are. This is now, to my contention, is proven psychologically quite clearly. And my story at the time was something like, I've got to have sex, I've got to have comforts, or else I won't be happy. And as those things stripped away, and as my wife and I went through our various challenges that all married couples go through, there's times when there's more and there's less physical interaction.
Hmm.
I was realizing that I had defined my story around those things. And I didn't know it at the time, but God was saying, that doesn't work, buddy. You can't do that. I work with a lot of men. I was just talking with a gentleman the other day who chose in a moment of weakness to not speak the truth he knew he needed to speak. And because of that one moment, that propagated forward for months in this relationship, he was afraid to speak the truth, to where it eventually blew the relationship up. And it's so funny, as particularly men, but I think as all people to a lesser or greater extent, we have to stand up and speak the truth and be authentic. And if we don't, it feels way better in the moment. But those consequences just roll and roll and roll. And you see that in my story here because I needed to deal with some stuff. And it was about this time I listened to a whole bunch of talks. I started reading a lot of books. I hadn't read a lot of self-help before this. And a lot of what he had was audio books, was self-help books. And I realized I needed to go to therapy. And it's a funny thing as a man to be like, I guess there's something wrong up here, and I got to deal with it. Well, I've told you enough of my story, and especially what happened to my child, to know it makes sense. There probably could be a few things wrong there.
Sure.
Now, what's really frustrating as well, and I'm going to make this as a blanket statement, although it doesn't apply as a truly blanket. There's a lot of therapists out there who, unfortunately, don't always do a lot of good. And I had some poor luck, and a couple of my first therapists. I remember the first marriage therapist we had, his idea for how to help my wife and I was to stage debate about the validity of gay marriage. And that just had nothing to do with the struggles our hearts were going through. We didn't go to him again after that. Um, and it's just, there's some therapists out there, Lord love them, I'm sure they think doing well, they don't help you. And that almost makes it worse. Because now at this point in my story, I'm angry. I'm craving physical intimacy more than I should be. And my wife's upset with me. That doesn't help that second part at all.
Right.
And I did the therapy thing. I did the Christian thing. I'm like, all right, well, am I just broken? Like, is this just like Michael's unsavable? If Jesus doesn't save me, therapists don't save me, where does that leave me? And
Yeah.
I oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I was agreeing with you. That's those are your boxes to check. These are my options here, you know. So I mean, I get it.
I think sometimes God has to bring us to a low point. Sometimes you hear the phrase rock bottom. I don't think there's such a thing as rock bottom except for death. Like that's really the only truly rock bottom. But at some point, God brings us down low enough until our pride crumbles. And what's funny here is the final piece that knocked me over came from a very unexpected direction. I was doing very well. I worked for a semiconductor design manufacturing company based out of Portland, Oregon. I was being promoted quickly. I was very successful. I was being paid very well at golden handcuffs out the wazoo. And one of the guys, after a meeting, more senior individual, not my direct report, chain of command, asked me to stay after for a meeting. And I said, okay, Justin, sure. What's going on? And as the door closes, he looks at me, he says, Michael, you are the most abrasive and dislikable person I've ever worked with. And I said, whoa, okay. So we're starting off on that note. All right. He said, I see tremendous potential in you, but I see too much potential to not say the way you're treating me and other people is really going to cause a problem. And so I listened to him. I tried to be respectful. I could tell he meant well, but I wasn't really open. So about a week after that, my boss calls me over for a meeting, and I thought it was about some project, and the door closes, and I say, "Oh, is it about such and such?" He's like, no, it's not. He looks at me and says, "Your entire team wants to quit. They can't stand working for you." I was like, "Whoa, okay, hold up here. What does that mean?" He said, "I've already approved the transfer to other managers because they can't stand working for you." And he looks at me, he leans in, and he says, "But I see potential in you. So if you're willing to listen and to change, I'll give you a whole other team." And he did. And he was ruthless, utterly ruthless, much out of love. Like I say this as it's one of the things I needed the most. But every single interaction I had, he'd be in the back of the room. He'd make notes afterwards. He'd be like, you did this, you did this. Here's how they interpret it. Here's how they interpreted this. Every written communication he was BCC'd on, same level of scrutiny. And between that and me suddenly realizing, oh my gosh, this is all in here, this anger. And it was the same stuff before. It was just anger, hurt, that I never learned how to channel. I never learned how to emote properly, never learned how to feel my feelings and share them. My feelings were yucky. Why do I want to feel those? They were still down the bottom of that trash compactor there, now 20 years compacted. It was a mess.
Right. Now, at some
So I,
point, you actually got some help for these things.
yes. And the funny is the help was coming in a way that I didn't realize if things were getting better because they still felt like they were getting worse. But what God was doing is God was bringing me face to face with what was really going on inside of my heart. And so then I was lucky. I did find another therapist who was a man who genuinely did a great deal of good in my life. And he helped me craft a letter to my father, helped me finally find forgiveness for my father. And at this point in time, we have three children and we have moved. I'm now working for another company, but I'm going through this therapy work and things start to look a little better. And you know how the story goes: as things start to look a little better, is when the next thing gets discovered,
Well,
right?
right. That's when you get punched in the face again.
Exactly. So the
Yeah.
anger's getting a little better. It seems like the sex stuff's a little bit better, and I'm drinking less. And then we get pregnant, and we get another fastball where my wife has a very unusual medical condition that she develops with the fourth pregnancy, where she can't get out of bed. Not like bed rest, like she actually literally can't get out of bed. Her joints, the best answer I got, and this is not a medical answer, was something like that hormone that women's bodies make right before birth, like loosen all the joints up for delivery. Her body started making that way sooner and way too much. And so it was an agony for her to get out of bed. So we had what we call the Irish triplets. And for 3 years, my wife was more or less in bed or dealing with a newborn. Now, over top of this, at the same time, is when God told me to leave the corporate world. And I was like, whoa, okay, no. And no, that seems silly right now. Like, we were just starting this for the first pregnancy of the three. I'm like, that's crazy. Like, we need the money, we need the health insurance, we need all this other stuff. And it almost through too many details to go through, God again and again hammered, no, I'm calling you to leave. You're not supposed to stay here. And so instead, here I am, a PhD chemist, and this sounds crazy to say it out loud, but God said, "Go run this company. It's a contractor company. They install fences." I was like, "What?" It's a family connection. It's a long story. We were invested in it anyways. It was dying, and so God said, "Do this, and then you also will be able to care for your wife and your children." And I was like,
Hmm.
"No to the no. I have no desire. I am not a hands-on guy. These are not the hands that make wood products. Like, that's just not how that works. Like, I'm an
Right.
intellectual guy. I like numbers." But I went and I just humbled myself in prayer before the Lord. And I took this piece of paper and I said, "Lord, every time I try it my way, things get worse. I'm really kind of tired of that. Like, I'm here at this point. I've surrendered a lot of my anger about my dad. I've surrendered a lot of anger about stuff that's happened to my children. It sucks when I do that. It's painful and embarrassing. Like, I don't want to tell the therapist some of these things I'm telling them, but when I do it, things get better." And as crazy as much as the world will judge me for leaving behind an awesome corporate job with all the benefits, six-figure income, do all the stuff, if you use what you want, Lord, I'm tired of doing it my way. And oh my gosh, you know that stupid game we play where you flip the Bible open and be like, "Oh, let's see what the Bible roulette says." And don't ever do that. But like I say, I did that,
Okay.
and I flip open, and the reading of the day was, "Consider the lilies; they neither toil nor soar. Consider the birds." Blah blah blah. I'm like, oh my gosh, really? Is that the one you have to give me right now? It says, you of little faith. Do you not know that you're worth many lilies? The Lord will provide for what you need." I'm like, fine, 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 fine. So I leave. It helped that the company I was working for had a volunteer separation package that was really quite nice. And so we had a little bit of a runway coming out of that. So
Goodness
we do
gracious.
this, and my wife's in this horrible situation. I'm in this horrible situation. And the marriage was struggling. It's hard when two people under that much of a load, and physical connection was less of an option for obvious reasons.
Right.
Um, and we didn't have money all of a sudden. Like, we had just always solved problems with money. And now all of a sudden we didn't have that much money, at least not as an income stream. And again, I feel like God was just really using this as a time to say, "Michael, do you depend on the world? Do you depend on sex? Do you depend on alcohol? Or do you depend on me?" And this is just those sort of moments where you're just there. And this is one of the things that's helped me so much in the coaching is, like, I talk to all these guys that are in that moment. And if you haven't been there, it's hard to understand even, like, the thoughts that go through your head of, like, what am I doing wrong? Like, did I just get this all wrong? Like, was this just some cosmic joke that I screwed up and made this the wrong answer to the test and now I'm being punished for that? Because, as a loving husband, I'm watching my wife just scream, literally scream in agony just to go potty. I'm getting up at 3 in the morning to make breakfast myself, drive up to the contracting thing, get them started, have to be home by 8, cook breakfast for everyone else, including my wife, take care of the children basically from 8 to noon, put them down to naps, then go deal with clients for a couple hours, come back, do dinner, stay at home at bedtime, put the kids to bed, and then I finally get to do the computer work I've been trying to do all day and wrap up the team that was installing. And then I start the same day again next time. And I'm
Yeah.
just there and I'm just like, what is going on? And I think one of the things God was teaching me there is I had to learn to ask for help. And so it wasn't really until the third baby. Again, I'm slow, I'm stubborn. But by the third baby, we said finally, okay, we need some help. And we actually reached out to the community and really got a couple of individuals willing to spend significant quantities of time at the house to help out with childcare and caring for my wife.
Nice.
I maybe want to pause and just make a note there that I think one of the things that the devil persuades us of that is just so toxic is that we're alone. And you read the stories in the Acts of the Apostles, and you read what they as a community did and how they support each other. And you look at the church today, and you don't see that. Like, there's exceptions. I'm not trying to be overly harsh here, but like, as a general rule, you don't see the level of like, oh, you need something? I'll just sell my property and pay for it.
Right.
Like, and I get it. Like, I understand that it's not always the best thing. I'm not advocating that everyone just dumps their things entirely, but there's an invitation to the Christian journey of depending upon each other. I remember when I was younger and I was trying to discern, should I become Catholic? I should become Christian at all. And I said, look, if this whole God thing was real, why would we just not pray that God does everything? Like, I break a bone, cool. God, you're all powerful. You're all good. Heal the bone. And the answer that this person gave me, Paul's parents actually, said, yes, God allows doctors to exist so that they can participate in the overall healing ministry of God. And it gives more glory to God to bring more people into the dance of participation than not. And okay, fine, that explains doctors. But there's so many of these other categories where I believe that's true as well. And I remember just the peace that came to the household, and all of a sudden we had help. And we some of the ladies we paid a little bit, some of them we didn't. There's a mix there. Like, each one was kind of an individual discussion, and it's not really about that so much because they knew we didn't have a lot of money. It's more about just me being humble enough to say, no, I actually really need help. Like, I can't keep doing this. This is too much.
Yeah.
And one of the funny things that came through that time, there were a number of times that the business was doing poorly. And a number of times we got to where the amount of money in the bank account was less than the amount of money that comes out the next month in terms of mortgage and food and all that kind of good stuff. And as a man, that's terrifying. You know, I I I sympathize. I know so many women who struggled with fears about money, and they look to their men, and the men don't have an easy answer. And sometimes the men give the answer of God will provide. And that's a hard answer for everyone. I think it's different. It's hard in different ways for men than for women. For women, I think when I watch them, I see they're afraid. They have the fear response. For men, it's more of a I'm a failure response.
Yes.
And I think it's important that both genders understand where the other's at. What men hear when their wives are afraid is this is not what they mean. But I think what men hear is my wife thinks I'm a failure. My wife thinks I'm no good. I'm not
Yep.
good enough.
Absolutely.
And I think what women hear is something like my husband won't protect me, won't take care of me. And these are just deep visceral needs. I don't know if I mentioned, but after my dad left, my mom had no money, had no job, had no degree. So money was a factor in my story too. And these are just these deep primal needs that it is so hard to turn to the cross and to say, despite how this makes no sense on paper, I'm going to trust you anyways. And both my wife and I had to do that. And we both had journeys. Heavens, we're still on that journey of just turning to the cross and saying, I believe this is what you've asked me to do. I will trust you for the rest. And when you finally get there, what's funny? Like, so many of the Christian journal struggles, it feels so big and so overwhelming, and it gets bigger and more overwhelming. You're just so crushed by it until you eventually finally just surrender the stinking thing. And you're like, oh, I guess that doesn't have to be so big after all. Oh, all right, Lord, I trust you. I'm gonna go out. I gotta bust my butt and keep working. Like, I was still working from 5 in the morning till 10 p.m. at night, but I trusted in Him for that phase, and that makes all the difference.
Yeah. It's you got an amazing story, brother.
So
Yeah.
we're not done. It gets even more fun. COVID hits. And about this time, I was just done with fencing. I mentioned that I'm not a woodworking guy. Like, I love my team. I built a great team, but they would joke, rightly so. Oh, boss is coming on site. Hide the tools. Don't let him touch the stuff because he'll just put stuff out of line. It was so true. Like I meant the best, but I don't have crafty skills. Like I'm the sort of guy who can like change the oil in the car, change the brake pads. That's it. It's beyond that. I pay the man to do it. I know I've learned my lesson.
Right.
Beyond that, I don't do. And I wanted something that I could thrive in. And so here comes the good Lord along again. He's like, okay, guys, Michael and Sterling, here's what we're going to do. You're going to move. You're going to sell this company, which seemed impossible. It's COVID starting. You're going to sell this company and you're going to move 8 hours north and start a whole new career. I'm like, yeah, that seems likely. I totally believe that right now. And by God's grace, it happened. And we ended up selling the company during COVID. It's funny. So in Idaho, people were a little less paranoid about COVID. There's a little bit of like a rebellious nature that exists up here. You
Yeah.
know, yeah, yeah. If you ever need to know more details about that, like I love Idaho. And so like our restaurants were still open. And so I remember having this business meeting in a restaurant trying to sell this thing in the middle of COVID. And he's like, yeah, let's do it. And then God said, okay, here's the deal. And at the time, the spot that we thought felt called to move, everything was you couldn't get a house unless you offered cash and 100 grand over asking price. That was what was required to even get a house. Like this is one of the areas that was discovered by California. And God arranged for us a house that lined up, and we got on a conventional loan 80% and for under asking price. My real estate agent was like, you don't understand, Michael. This does not happen right now. Like, no one does this, not even remotely. And I said, well, you do, and the Lord's on your side. And then he lined us up. He set us up for the new businesses. I mean, again, we're still on this journey where there are months where the amount of money is not enough for what's how
Right.
comes up in the next month. But that's part of the journey. And, I can say at this point here now, like once you've gone through that enough times, the devil comes and whispers in your ear, aren't you afraid? Aren't you scared? I'm like, dude, we've played this game before. I don't have time for this. I love it when C.S. Lewis writes that there's certain lies the devil tells that are best respond to with simple belly laughter. Like you don't need to get intellectual, just laugh at it. Like that's a good one. I've heard that one before.
Wow. Been there, done that, you know,
Yep. Yep.
too often. Too often. Okay. All right. So that takes us through COVID.
That takes us through COVID. So we're moved up here. One of the things I think we need to pull in here as well as we're going through this discussion is this idea of spiritual attack. And one of the things the devil loves to do is hit you when you're down. And it's pretty common that, at least my wife and I found, when we're trying to discern something to follow God's will, trying to say, is this the right thing? He throws curveballs at us. Like, I don't know what the deal is. We're like, there are times like, you and your spouse feel like, okay, we've got some connection, we've got a little bit of alignment in the morning, and then the evening comes along. And I don't know who this crazy person is in my household, but they clearly can't be the same person I talked to this morning. It's possible it's me, but that seems highly unlikely, so it must be them. And
I'm
and
familiar
you're
with
just
the
like,
phenomena.
yes, yes, it's well documented. It's been observed by many. And I think one of the things that's helped, I don't always know for sure when something is spiritual attack, but I know that it's real sometimes. And I know that sometimes it can be as little as, you know what? I'll tell you a funny story that just happened 2 days ago. My wife has specialty shoes because she's got, for a foot support thing. And for whatever reason, they were lost. And then another set of her specialty shoes was stretched out by one of the kids. Then another set had something else happen to it. The dog got involved, something like that. And all of a sudden, she went from having three that fit her to zero that fast. And you're just like, all right, what's going on here? And so she got all upset. But then I said, look, honey, I love you more than the cost of shoes. Like, she said, but we can't afford shoes. I'm like, we can afford shoes, honey. We can afford shoes. And it's just funny, the devil hits you. Like when you already are like a little worried about money, when you're already a little bit worried about whatever, is when he throws at you that little monkey wrench to really stir it up.
Yeah.
And it's not always, but there's a lot of times more and more that I'm just like, I looked, I once heard it said, don't argue with the devil, don't engage with the devil, don't debate the devil, just pray to the Lord. Honestly, I consider myself a smart guy, but I'm nowhere near the intellectual weight class of the devil. Like I've just heard too many stories, read too much stuff. That dude, like wherever he is, Lord bless him, he is just way smarter than me. It is not worth my time to try to engage with him. I'm going to lose. I've tried many times in my life to engage with them. I always lose. Why do I want to do that again? And
That's a
so
great way
instead,
to
it's
look
just
at
like,
that.
yeah, yeah, I heard a story once. I don't know if this is true, but it's a great story. And this lawyer who's incredibly smart, and he publicly announced a bet that he would be willing to have an argument with the devil. And so that afternoon, a strange man with a suit shows up, walks into his office, and sits down. And 10 minutes later, the man walks out. The lawyer's in there crying and sobbing in a state of serious mortal sin. And it's just this idea of the arrogance that we dare engage with a being of angelic intellect. It's just not about us. We have a savior. We have to lean on him.
Right.
And that I think is such a healthy perspective to be like, I don't have to win this fight. I don't even need to know if it's a spiritual attack. Lord, bring my wife peace about shoes. Whatever's going on, protect her. Lord, if the devil's involved, please defend us. It's that simple. Like
It
there's such
should
a
be.
freedom that, yeah, well, there's such a freedom that comes when it's not about me. And that's hard. Like I'm a successful dude. At least I used to call myself that. Like I'm accomplished. I came from the childhood I came from. And, no one in my family's line made the kind of money that I was making when I worked in corporate. It looked like a textbook story of transformation, of undoing of the whole generation stuff. Now it turns out it was all still a lot of those problems were lurking under there. They
Yeah.
still are. I'm still struggling with those problems, but by the
Do
grace of God, confronting them, I'm making some progress on them. Just the other day, I lost it in anger, and kids did something really dumb. It's funny how that works.
you feel like you're making progress, conquering those demons, and breaking that generational curse, so to speak?
I think the first thing I want to say to that is I think generational curses are real. Like you read this in the Old Testament, and I think a lot of us modern Christians don't like the Old Testament and don't like to really think about certain parts of the Old Testament. And it's very clearly said, like the third generation, the thousandth generation, like there's stuff there that is talked about. And I think that's real. And I think we need to treat it with gravity. And if you look at your family lines, you tend to see it. Like my wife's story is hers to share, but she has her own things that just sin, patterns of damage, of pain that tend to be, you see it in this relative, you see it in that relative, you see it in that grandparent and that great grandparent. And I think we as Christians need to take that seriously. And so I'm going to go into a space just briefly with your permission that might be a little bit contentious within the Christian community,
Go
but
ahead.
it's the idea of there are prayers specifically for generational sin. And there are prayers and formatted prayers to deal with things like a Masonic curse. The Freemasons were explicitly anti-Christ. And as part, if you joined the Freemasonry Society, and it got to certain levels, I'm not an expert in Freemasonry, but my understanding is you were required to participate in a curse at one point in time, and that curse has generational impact. And there are prayers that good priests and good religious folk are developing. And these prayers aren't like a silver bullet. It's not like the prayer test the thing, but they're a way of opening up your heart to allow God's healing to come in. And what's really cool about a lot of these prayers is you don't even need to know for sure that that's the case. A lot of, at least in Catholic teaching, so I'm going to limit myself here just to make sure I stay on solid ground. At least within Catholic teaching, there's a lot of prayers, for example, binding prayers that I can say, as long as it's over the right target, I can say it over myself for sure, that even if I'm wrong, don't cause any harm. And so, for example, a simple binding prayer might be if I'm at the gym, and let's say there's an attractive young lady wearing less clothing than perhaps she should be. And let's say that my eyeballs are really struggling to stay where they're supposed to stay. A simple prayer of Spirit of lust, by the power of Jesus Christ and by the blood shed on the cross, I command you to go to the foot of the cross and receive your judgment. In other words, leave me alone.
Right.
But the prayer is specific. It's not by the power of Michael. The power of Michael has no real power, but by the power of Jesus Christ.
Right.
And if that's not a spirit of lust, if that's just weakness of the flesh, it still turns my eyes towards Jesus.
Wow. Excellent. You brought up so many good points. I mean, with everything that you've been talking about, I'm not even sure where to start, digging in. But I love the message that you're bringing forward. You know, you brought up the spiritual warfare, and that's something that always comes up in our testimonies. I think on this show,
Yeah.
especially because when you acknowledge that God is in your life, and when you acknowledge that it is in fact a testimony, that you're building, that you're living, well, then the devil acknowledges it too. And as
Mm-hmm.
soon as you get on that radar, the devil's looking for you. And like we said earlier. So, when all of these things start to happen, They aren't all necessarily because of that, but that is at the root of knocking you off of your path and making sure that following, this way that you've chosen is just too tough to keep going on. Because really what he wants you to do is quit.
Can I throw a fun number at you? A fun
Of course.
perspective.
Absolutely.
One of the Catholic teaching is that every human being has their own unique guardian angel. So you have a guardian angel, I have a guardian angel, each of my kids has a guardian angel, and that guardian angel spends all of eternity praising God in heaven until the moment the human that he was or she, I don't know what the genders are for angels, I'm not gonna put there, but that they were destined to guard is born. They spend the entirety of that human's life guarding that human, and then they go back to praising God in heaven. But here's what's interesting in Revelations, it says that roughly a third of the stars fell, and those are a third of the angels. And so I'm a math guy, right? And so what that means for me is the two-thirds that stayed have to be at least, including enough numbers, for one guardian angel for every human being who ever exists. All right? We're talking billions, at least, if not more. Like we don't know the depth of time, but it's a significant number. I think probably 40 to 50 billion minimum is a reasonable conservative guess for every human being that's ever existed, at least so far. All
Okay.
right? Now, here's what's interesting is half that are demons. So let that number sit in for a second. Like this is not just like there's a few stray spirits floating around out there. Like this is a serious battle with significant numbers of troops. And I think the reason why I like this image is it gives me a sense of gravity. Like it's not just oh, a spirit of lust is plaguing you. Like there could be multiple spirits currently coming along. You read in the Bible when Jesus, casts out multiple spirits out of people. Or there's legion when he casts them in the swine. Like what was like 1,000 spirits there. Like at first that sounds a lot, but when you start thinking about the numbers, that's actually not that many, considering how many spirits there are out there in at play. All right. So with that in mind, think about this spirit, this battle. I want to go back to my buddy C.S. Lewis. He allows his friends like me to call him Jack. He was dead long before I met him, but you know what I mean. All right. So Jack and I read what Jack writes, and one of the things he wrote is the devil has two different ploys he's put out throughout time. Ploy number one is none of it's real. All right. There's no such thing as God. There's no such thing as devil. It's just human flesh. You see multiple times throughout history where that lie has manifested. None of it's real. The other play he makes is it's all real, but the devil's stronger. Right? Like those are the two plays he likes to make. And the devil stronger can also kind of be God is bad or God isn't good or God is all powerful. But there's different ways of diminishing God and making the devil appeal stronger. And in the Screw Tape Letters, C.S. Lewis writes, the ultimate goal from the devil's perspective would be to get to a spot where you can persuade people that the devil is real, but God is not. Right?
Right.
In a funny way, I think if you look at our mainstream culture, we're closer to that perspective than ever before.
I would agree. I would absolutely agree. There's also something to be said for convincing everybody that neither of them are real, right?
Yes, absolutely. The
Yeah,
devil wins that in that exchange too. Then he
exactly.
gets to operate unopposed.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. No, I think we're very close to that, unfortunately. That's
And so I
part of the
think
reason why people were doing what we're doing.
absolutely. But I
Yeah.
think one of the things we as Christians need to stand up and do and proclaim is the devil is real. The evil spirits that fell with him, the third of the stars that fell, are real.
Yeah.
This is a real battle. And we would be fools to pretend it's otherwise. This is a battle we need to engage. And we need to engage it with humility. The humility that says it's not Michael, it's not Rory that will defeat the devil's minions. It's Jesus Christ. It's his blood poured out on Calvary that will. And I've got to have the humility to stand where I am now and say, I'm a hot mess and I can't do it. And I don't know about you, but that's hard for me. After
Oh
what
yeah.
happened when I was a kid and I couldn't do it, like I entered the world with, I will always be able to do it. I will take care of it. I will fix it and make sure this whole scenario never happens again.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's hard for, and you're a men's coach. I think it's hard for any man, especially, to admit any of those things, even if you're asking for help from, Jesus himself. You are still asking for help. And so there's still that idea that you're too weak to handle things.
I had this. I've contemplated. One of the mystics wrote, and this is not official dogma at all. This is just one writing of one mystic wrote this idea that when every human dies, Jesus appears three times and offers them mercy, and if only after the third time of declining the mercy of Jesus is the soul actually lost to hell. And I liked this image a lot because I really think it emphasizes how merciful our Lord is. But then I got to thinking, why would a human being decline mercy? Like, imagine you're dead, our Lord Himself appears. Why would you say no? And here's what I got to: I would say no to anything that I didn't want to admit I actually needed the mercy for. Let me make this real practical. There have been moments in my marriage that my wife and I have not agreed. There have been moments that words have been said that were perhaps unkind and perhaps should not have been said in the tones and ways they were. You can probably imagine a hypothetical scenario like this yourself.
Sure. I think we've all had those moments. I understand
It,
exactly what you mean, though.
absolutely. If our Lord appeared to me and said, Michael, I will give you mercy for all the terrible things you said and all the ways you hurt your wife, including A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, K. I might at first be like, you know what, our Lord, I understand A through E. Yeah, that was my bad, but like F, G, and H, I don't think I'm responsible for those. Those are her. He said, no, Michael, those are your fault. But I didn't do it, you Lord. She did this, she did that, she did whatever. No, Michael, those are your fault. Do you want mercy for them? But I'm not at fault. Do you want mercy for them? And it's a silly example I'm using here, but I think there's truth to this that for me to truly accept all that I've done wrong is a humiliating, by definition, prospect. And I want to invite all of us that that's what we've got to do here now. Don't wait till you die. So it's, it's better now early on because then you can actually start to reap the fruit of it now.
Right. You can't argue with that at all. At all. Wow. I love that. The a lot of the things that you're talking about right now, I realize that they're part of your story, but you are talking about things that so many men deal with, and women also in this world. And one of the things that comes up a lot is, how do we start to change it? Yes, this is what's happening. Yes, this is what the devil wants. Yes, this is what's in a perfect world. The devil convinces us that he doesn't exist and that God doesn't exist, right? And then he's unopposed. But um, as Christians who want to be better, as people who want to stand up and be lions, as people who say, hey, there is really a battle going on out there. I want to step up. I want to do more. When you were going through that, I'm sure you asked those questions. What'd you come up with for answers?
I go back to what reached me. What reached me is exactly the same as what the early Christians did all the way back in the Acts of Apostles. They didn't set off. I mean, okay, great. There's Peter's speech to the 3,000. We'll come back to that number in a second. But as a general rule, what happened was it was one-on-one acts of love. It's Paul multiple times through our relationship being willing to speak the truth with charity and listen to my story. It's Ben being courageous enough to step into my life and say, here's a flash drive, here's a business card, here's an offer to buy lunch, and here's some words of encouragement. It's Gary, my boss, being willing to say, this is the problem, but I'll be with you through it. Real transformation, we really change things one person at a time. And again, Acts of the Apostles, what would they do? They would rescue one person at a time. They'd go out there and just love on one person. And that's not a satisfying answer. I don't know about you, but like in my modern mind, I'm like, I have technology. I should be able to help 5 billion people at a time, right? Like, doesn't that how technology works? And the answer is no. Um, it isn't. There's a young man in my community, you have to be very vague, who has a lot of struggles. And in some ways, his story has some rough parallels to mine. And so I have spent some time talking to this young man. And it's slow. It's not like one conversation and he's suddenly over all these problems. But it's now been many conversations in, and some of them in a group, some of them individual. But it's this investment. What he really is asking is, Michael, do you love me enough to stay with me through the bumps, to stay with me as I'm crazy? Because a lot of the other humans in his life didn't love him that much. And this idea of just one person at a time is, I think, what we need to do. But there's such a freedom there. Like I love the stories of Mother Teresa, where she would just go out and find just one poor person, and she'd bring that poor person into the rooms and say, care for this one person, see Jesus in this one person. And that has to be enough because that's all we can do. With this embedded is the idea of humility, that I can't do more than that. Um, but I've tried repeatedly to just be with one person at a time. And I say be intentionally because we are human beings. So many men get caught up with the idea that we're human doings. And I do this, I do that, I perform at this, I perform at that, I threw the winning touchdown, whatever. But that's actually not how we reach people. We just have to be with them.
Yeah.
And whether you're a parent, being with a child, or there's a good example. There's another young man that I'm thinking of that I just be with him with outdoor adventures because his father won't do that. But there's different ways to be present. But that is what speaks to people far more than technology, than eloquent words, and whatever else you want to be.
Yeah. That's great advice. It starts at home. It starts with you. It starts with just one person at a time. When we talk about building discipleship and putting the word out and, expressing ourselves, I think a lot of people take on an expectation of, I have to be in front of thousands of people, at a stadium or something, right? Up at the podium or at the peak, telling everybody, sharing his word or something. They have these grandiose notions of how it has to work. And, you know, part of what we talk about here a lot is, hey, can you do it one thing at a time? Can you do it one person at a time? And I think we just get in our own way of that
Yeah.
because we don't have the patience for one thing at a time.
I want to go back to the number 3,000 of Pentecost, and it's a perfect tie in. So here's a fun little trivia fact. The number 3,000 only occurs twice in the Bible. Numbers in the Bible mean more than numbers, right? We're modern scientists. We like to think, oh, seven means exactly seven. Well, biblically, seven means a lot more than seven. But
Yeah.
the number 3,000 occurs only twice. Once is at Pentecost. I'm going to put you in the spot and just see. I'll give you a few seconds. Can you remember the other spot 3,000 is used in the Bible? I'll give you it involves Moses.
I'm not pulling up the number,
At the,
like in
at the
verse
golden
and that type of
calf,
thing.
Moses, Aaron makes the
Oh,
golden
Sodom and
calf.
Gomorrah, right?
Not Sodom and Gomorrah, it's the golden calf. And Moses comes down with the 10 tablets. Aaron's made the golden calf. Moses gets mad, melts the golden calf down, and commands the Israelites to kill. The Levites rise up and kill 3,000 of the Israelite men that were involved in the making of the golden calf.
Oh my gosh.
And
Okay.
so here's what's so cool about this. At the event of the golden calf, a new priesthood is established at the death of 3,000 men. That is how man did it. At the new Pentecost, a new priesthood is established at the saving of 3,000 lives, at the resurrection, if you will, the spiritual resurrection of 3,000 people. And here's why I think that ties in. We humans, we read these big numbers. We want to say, cool, I'll go be Peter and I'll give that speech that'll convert 3,000. But we realize that if it's just on me, if it's just like my plan, I'm far more likely to end up in the Moses scenario. It's that God takes us, that when we do the one thing at a time, one person at a time, God will just bless it all of a sudden. And his plan should like blow up in ways to undo what the devil has done that are just so powerful and so amazing. But like that comes, Pentecost came because Peter was present with Jesus, just there, that intimate presence. And then the 3,000 came.
Nice. Nice. Yeah, I was not pulling that number up, brother. I appreciate that though.
It's okay. It's a rare one.
Yeah, yeah, but it's a great point. It really is. So, we're then called to just start with one.
Start
That's
with
what
one.
you're saying. Yeah,
Unless
start
you have
with one.
six kids, in which case, man, it's hard to balance all of them.
Well, like you said to me before, well, you didn't have six all at once.
That's true.
So you
That's
start with
true.
one, then you went to another one, and to another one. So that works out. I love that, man. I really do. I appreciate you coming and sharing all of this stuff. I really do. I think you and I could probably talk about this for another hour.
I
But
believe that.
unfortunately, that would be a rough episode for everybody to try and get through. 2.5 hours of you and I going at it. But as we, kind of wrap this up, yeah, for today, I want to kind of put you on the spot then. All right.
Yeah.
People who want to go out and they want to help that one person. And I think too often we feel like we have to like convert, people, bring them over. What is it you're looking to accomplish with just that one person? Just to maybe open their mind and, that type of thing. What is it you're setting out to try to accomplish to help that one person apart from a complete and total transition and conversion, over to Christianity?
I've been having conversations recently with my oldest child about college plans. And there's this easy fallacy that somehow it's up to me to map out the life for this child, or that this child's job is to map out their own life. And one of the things that comes up for the two of us as we pray about this continuously is we don't get to know that much. We don't get to see all that there. Like, we don't get to know, will this child go to college? Will this child get married young? Will this child get married old? Like, all these things we don't get to see. And I think there's this temptation to pride to say, I'm going to go out and I will convert someone. And in the same way, my child doesn't need a complete plan for me. Like, I want to be prudent, and we're designing a high school plan that will set this child up with a lot of college credit so that if this child feels called to go to college, then great. We've had that. We're trying to be prudent about this. I'm not saying do nothing, but what this child really needs is just to be loved right now because God does know the plan for this child. And in the same way, when I'm going out and serving someone, I don't need to know the plan. I need to know that God has put this person here and that I have this talk that says, love on this person. Pro tip, the less you want to love on the person, probably the more you're supposed to be. Like that's, I remember the story of Saint Therese of Lisieux that she's in this convent and she's writing all this journal. And there's this one sister that just drives her batty. She can't stand her. And the Lord said, that's the one you need to love on the most. And you read in her journal, she's like, "Oh, it's so hard." But in reality, that other sister never knew that Teresa didn't even like her. And this is now a canonized saint of the church, and so like I'm not that level. The people who know I don't want to serve them, they probably know. But my point is to say, I don't need to have an overall agenda. God has that. I don't need to even know the bigger picture. I just need to be present right now. Can I love this person now? And it is so hard because so often that person we're called to love right now is the person who just hurt us, is the person, maybe it's our spouse, and they just said some mean thing and stabbed us, in a spot that we were very tender in. And I don't want to love that person right now. I don't want to do this act of kindness for that person. This person may not even see this act of kindness I'm doing, and I get no credit. Right?
I've heard all
But it
those
doesn't mean
thoughts. This is ringing true. I hear you.
But God doesn't call us to get credit. God doesn't call us to have the big overarching plan. He calls us just to love that person right here, right now, in this moment. And to love in this practical definition, because the word love is so corrupted by English language. Don't get me started on that. But I'm going to go with the definition of to will the good of the other solely for the sake of the other. For their own good, I want them to have good. And I think that's a good enough definition to run with for now to say, when I'm called to go out and serve the one, just that. Um, I come up with lots of examples, but I think I'll leave it there.
Amen. I think it's a great place to leave it. I appreciate you and everything you have brought to this today. This is a conversation we really haven't been able to have yet in the other meetings we've had, and I knew that once you and I got going on this, that you were going to just take the ball and run with it. I really appreciate you sharing what you have and going as deep as you have, and I'm glad that you felt like you could do that here. And I'm sure that somewhere someone's listening to this and it's helping them immensely because you decided to do that. So I appreciate you making a difference in somebody's life today, Michael. I really, really, truly.
Rory, you're doing an amazing thing with this work and these podcasts you're building. Keep listening to the voice of the Lord. He's the guy who sets the direction, and then he's the guy who blesses at the right time. He makes the rains fall, and he makes the sunshine, and all good things that grow.
Amen. Thank you, man. Folks, that's been another episode of Wake Up the Lions with another fabulous guest, making us all think just a little bit and giving us a different way to look at some things. And, if you need to, go back and listen to this one again because we covered a lot of ground here today. And the reason that I want you to do that, folks, is because it is time. It's time to wake up the lions. More than that, it's time for you to take your rightful place with your brothers and sisters and let them hear you roar. The world is ready. You're ready. You just have to believe it.